A lot of times, you might not have the exact trigger you're looking for in Smart Suite's automations in order to initiate the automation that you have in mind. Well, in this training, we're going to be breaking it down by showcasing how you can use an advanced formula using some dates and some other fancy logic to actually trigger an automation with a trigger that doesn't exist otherwise. So if that's of interest, stick around and let's get into it. There's a lot to cover in this particular topic, so let's go ahead and hop on straight into my solution here. I'm inside of my sales CRM and I'm in my opportunities application. And what I want to imagine right now is that we want to build an automation that says, hey, if it's more than 30 days after the actual close date, I want to send an email. So the first thing I might do is actually head up to my automations here and try to fiddle around with some of the pre-existing triggers. I might start by saying when a record matches conditions, and I start looking at the date triggers. Let's say I go to the actual close date, and I might say something like is on or after, 30 days from now, or something like that, 1 month from now. Now, this works pretty well, but what if I want a little more precision, and what if I want to calculate all of this in a field so that I can see even better the results I'm getting? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down. So let's ignore this automation for now. We're going to exit without saving. We're going to head on back over here and we're going to first fiddle around with some fancy formulas. So first and foremost, let's clean up our workspace a little bit here. I've got a lot of information that I won't need for this particular formula. All I really care about here is that actual close date. So I'm going to go into my fields to display and hide a lot of this stuff. So here's my actual close date, I'll keep this, but let's toss all this other stuff just so that I don't get distracted while I'm writing my formulas. So I'm gonna go ahead and push that all away. All I'm looking at is that actual close date, and now I'm gonna build my first formula. And what I wanna do is start with a formula field, and I'm just gonna call this my first formula because I'm gonna use quite a few to kind of, piece by piece, get where I wanna go here. First thing I wanna do is compare two dates. I want to compare the actual today's date, like this moment in time, and of course that's constantly changing, but I want to take that nebulous entity, and compare that with the actual date that we've marked here for our close, right? So let's just do that. Let's just take the actual close date. I'm going to use this formula, or this field, and I'll compare it to the present moment in time. And I'll do that by just starting with a greater than symbol. So let's go with actual close date is greater than, and I don't have a today function here, but I do have a now function. And so I'll go ahead and bring in the now function, and we see by the syntax here, this says it's going to return today's date and the current time as a date time value. So let's plug that in, right? So I've got a field here comparing it to the actual moment in time. Let's add that field up and see what it produces for us. So remember, this particular formula, it's using some logic. It's going to be a less than or equal to, so it's either going to be true or false. And you see I have no data here, nothing. It's false in all cases. So what happens if I drill back in here and I flip it around? Let's say it's less than now. So if I set this up, now when it marks itself, we see that in two cases, the date here is less than today. And that makes perfect sense, right? Today is 2022, and so both of these dates are obviously in the past. As of the time of recording here, it's December 31st, the last day of 2022. So we could actually put in another particular date. Let's say, in this case, I'll pick January 10th. And if I put this in here, of course, it will not be checked. But when the current date is greater than January 10th, 2023, then this would automatically update with a checked box, because that's exactly what it does. That's the formula that we've written. Now let's take this a level further and actually analyze 30 days after the close date. So rather than looking at just the close date itself, let's take this little actual close date field and first add 30 days to it, and then compare now with whatever we get from that summation. So first we'll do the second formula here. Again, I'll start with a formula field type. And I'm just going to call this second because, as you know, I strongly recommend going step by step and breaking these up into pieces so that you can get a grasp of what's happening. Here again, I'm going to go into Advanced Editor, and I've already copied the name of that field. I'm using the actual close date. But what I really want to do with this is I want to perform some math. And so I'm going to say date add. when I type in date here, I see my date functions popping up. I want to use this date add function, which if we look at it, says it's going to take a date, it's going to take a count, so a number, and then it's going to take a unit, and it will output the math. So, for example, if we take date add to a target date and add 10 days, and if the target date is the first day of 2021, then 10 days later is the 11th day of 2021, right? Pretty straightforward. So let's go ahead and implement this date add function. I'm going to use that, and the first date field that I want to refer to is my actual close date, right? So then I want to add 30 days to this, so comma 30, and then the last variable is days. And note that here on the syntax, I can use minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years, a lot of options available to me, but this is going to work just fine. I want to count 30 days after the actual close date. So let's add the field, okay? Once this takes a minute to think, it's now doing the math for us. 30 days after the 14th of September is October 14th. 30 days after the 12th of February is March 14th, and that's because February had 28 days in 2021, right? So everything's working out properly. The math is working great. Now what I want to do is take this date, my output here, this more complicated formula, and I want to replace what I had in the previous formula. So I don't want to evaluate my actual close date with now. I want to evaluate 30 days after my close date with now. So I can just highlight the piece that I want to replace. I've already copied the working formula in my clipboard here, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste it as I've highlighted over here. So that's one really easy hack. If you're breaking your formulas down into little bite-sized chunks, this is the way to do it. Get a formula working, make sure that it does what you want, and then build a slightly more robust one and just grow your original formula step by step, as I just did. Okay, so now what this formula is going to calculate is the close date plus 30 days beyond now or not, right? And so it's going to output that. So let's go ahead and save this up. And we don't see any change in our outputs. And that's because we don't have anything that's borderline, right? If we had something that was within the last 30 days, let's say I had something, again, I'm on December 31st. Well, if I had something on December 8th of the same month, right? This is not quite 30 days past yet. So when I select something on December 8th, this output does not change. But if I choose something that is in November, let's say November 29th, that is beyond 30 days. As soon as SmartSuite has a minute to calculate, you see that, yes, the checked box was updated. So now I want to take this yet a step further, and I want to take all of this beautiful formula that I just wrote. I'm going to copy it all, and I'm going to write my magnum opus, my third formula here. I'm going to look up formula. Let's select the right field type, and this is going to be my third. And I'm going to go into my advanced editor one more time, and this time I'm going to write a little bit of logic. I will say if, and what I'm going to test here is a little bit of logic with some date formulas. If that checked box, if that function is true, if the evaluation that we just carved out is true, so I'll paste it in. That's my first parameter. Now my second parameter is, well, if it's true, what do you want me to do? I want you to output trigger, as in trigger the automation. And if it's not true, then I just want you to output nothing, be blank. And so to denote that, I'm showing two double quotes right here. All right, now, fingers crossed, we're going to save this field up and see what happens. Instead of seeing a checked box here, we've given it a different output, an output of trigger. And so now I can use this particular formula to trigger an automation. So how would we do that? Well, we go into our automations, and we start building an automation that says when a record matches conditions. Choose our opportunities app, which is where we are by default here. And the condition that we want to build is we want to refer to our magnum opus, our great formula. And if that formula says trigger is equal to trigger, then and only then do we want to fire our automation. So I can then go ahead and add some actions. Maybe we want to send a follow-up email. In this case, what would our automation do? Well, we would add the action of sending an email, sure, either from SmartSuite directly or maybe from Google Gmail or perhaps Outlook, whatever the case may be. But the idea here is that, hey, what's triggering that automation? Let's exit without saving just for the sake of demonstration. Again, this formula is only going to tell us when it's been more than 30 days past the close date. So in this particular example, we close out a project, we would mark it. So let's say we closed a project on November 30th. Okay, well, once we save that up, guess what? The formula calculates and says, well, after December 30th, then we want to send that email, and that's why we get that trigger output. And so that would then trigger the automation. We would send an email that says, hey, we finished your project 30 days ago. Would you please give us some feedback here, or whatever your process is, right? And note that when we're done with this, we can ditch all of these other complicated fields that we built in order to get to our complete formula. So I don't need all of those other ones in place anymore. I really only used them to help me think through the logic to get to here. So now I've got my final formula, and I could just call it final trigger for email automation, and I'm good to go, right? Update that field, build your automation, and now you're gonna send an email 30 days after the close date. I know we went fast in this, and this was definitely a lot more complicated than a lot of the other stuff that we cover. So go back and rewatch if any of it was overwhelming, and I look forward to seeing you in the next training. If you have any questions about what we covered in this training, please ask them below in the comments section of this video. And until then, we'll see you in the next training.